We are now joined by Dan Deacon. Dan is going to be Dan is going to be.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
No.
I couldn't resist.
No, go, yeah. Dan is going to be performing at Hasselfest on November 10th at Once Ballroom in Somerville. The show is being presented by Boston Hassel. Dan, thanks so much for speaking with me today.
No problem. Sorry, I made spooky ghost noises while you were doing the introduction.
Hey, seeing as it is Halloween, it's appropriate.
Ooh.
The soundtrack was
diminishing returns on those woos. I'm going to talk over you the whole time. I'm sorry. I'm terrible at phone interviews. The latency is the worst.
The soundtrack was recently released for Rat Film, which you provided the score for. Am I correct in saying that actual rats were a part of the recording process?
You are correct in saying that. There were a couple of instances where rats were used to either as like conceptual material or to actually generate material that was later reused and reconceptualized. You see it a couple of times in the film. There's a performance that Thea staged and asked me to make music and if I could try to make it with rats. So we built an enclosure out of 3 theremins, and theremins make the sound similar to those spooky ghost sounds I was just making, and I promise I won't make again. And I don't know if those will get edited out, but so if they do, people have no idea what I'm talking about. Maybe the ghost sounds will be even spookier. Anyway, so a lot of that we ran that experiment for about 4 hours of the rats moving around the enclosure or huddling in the enclosure, and then tried it with a group of rats and tried it with one rat. And then there's a couple of other instances where rhythmic content was used. We used recordings of sensors on a rat's hippocampus, and every time, I guess like a synapse is fired, someone recorded it as sound and then brought it into the audio spectrum so we could hear it. I'm just waking up and drinking my coffee, so I apologize if this is
you're fine.
Ramble.
When you're recording a new album, is part of the process for you engineering new equipment to use as well as composing?
Rather than new equipment, it would be a new framework to work within. I try to always either learn new software or write in a different way than I did in the past, or revisit something I haven't done in a long, long time, which can be just as challenging. It's not so much like riding a bike, especially since software is always updated. Like there's this program Reason that I used to do everything in, and then I transitioned to Ableton Live, and I'm trying to go back to Reason, and it's changed so much. So it'd be like, you go to get on a bicycle and all of a sudden the handlebars are in the back or something. You're like, what the hell is this? So.
And when you're composing, is the process for you tinkering with new sounds, new loops, or do you sit down at the piano and start, or what is that like?
It changes song to song. Sometimes there's a melody in my head, and I'll try to get it out. Sometimes the song is all the way in there, and the process is trying to translate it from thought to sound. Other times I'll have a bass. I just pick up my acoustic and start strumming, man, Now that my studio has my piano set up, sometimes it's piano. Other times it's, just improvising with my equipment and recording that, or just sitting down at the computer and trying to construct a loop or listening to material to sample.
What's the process like of selecting the material you want to present live?
Oh, that's a good question. That sort of comes about midway through the origin of a song. So, if the way anything starts, it's like a sketch. And if I start realizing that it's more than a sketch and I want to try to make it presentable, I'll start thinking about what context it will be. And if the context is live performance, that'll kind of start shaping the way the track will be composed. I'll save space for vocals, and I'll probably have heavier percussion than I wouldn't. I'm trying to break away from that in running this new record, so that I'm just writing music and I'm not writing knowing where it's going to live or how it'll be performed, because I feel like that has started to dictate all aspects of my music. Is it's home, if you will, and I want to try to just write and not worry about how it might disrupt my current live setup or anything like that.
Are you working on a new album right now?
I am, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
I think I just did. I don't have much more to say.
Okay.
Other than, it's in the writing stage, and I'm just trying to write in a new fashion.
When you're performing, is there a deal of improvisation, or is a lot of it planned out beforehand?
It's both. I'd say the macro structure is definitely set. I know what songs I'm going to play. Those songs are composed. But every song has elements where I improvise on top of it, especially in regards to the vocal manipulation. None of that is the same. That changes on a nightly basis. And I'm always trying to do things differently and hear how they sound, whether knowing that it might be a failure, but I think that's the pleasure of improv, is the risk.
I saw you open for Arcade Fire a few years ago at the Xfinity Center in Mansfield, Mass. Is there anything particular you enjoy with performing in a large venue, or do you prefer performing in a small room more?
I prefer performing it's in any way possible, so I guess that's not a preference. So I don't prefer performing in one place or another. But it's always nice to perform to, like the Arcade Fire tour, most of the audience had no idea who I was, and a lot of those people probably only went to like a handful of shows a year, while people who go to club shows or small shows probably go to many shows. And there's just different elements of audience mindset. Same with a festival. People go to a festival because they know a couple of bands, but they're going to discover more. And people go to a show to see a headlining band because they know the headlining band's music. So if you're an opening band, your job is to not only try to entertain the audience that's there to see something else, but to engage with them in a way that makes them want to learn more about you and find out more about your music. When you're headlining, the goal is to meet the expectations of your audience that's coming to see you, that knows your music and has heard about your show, perhaps, and your goal is to try to entertain them to the point of wanting to return. So it's always a different mindset, and that's always based upon the makeup of the audience and the context in which you're performing in. So I really love to perform, and if I had to choose, I guess I would choose smaller shows. It's just the nature of my show, and the audience participation is fun, but scale is always great to play with, and given the opportunity, I'll always take it.
Where does the audience participation aspect of your performances come from? Is that something you developed over time?
It definitely evolved over time. It was always something. I mean, early on in college, I remember hearing the John Cage quote that music is theater, and I kept thinking about the important aspect of performance in music. And this was the early 2000s when IDM was pretty popular, and it was really boring to watch. The music had very cool and challenging aspects to it, but I just couldn't stand watching someone sit there on a laptop. It wasn't performance, especially 4 acts in a row. It just didn't warrant a crowd gathering and standing and watching that. And that was what music was, electronic music anyway. So I really couldn't stand that. Excuse me. I just kept thinking about the roots of dance music and how it was always, even up until very late in the game, in its historical context, it was always about watching the dancers. Even in like a club, people would go to a club to dance with each other, not to watch the DJ. So that really influenced me playing on the floor. Plus, at the time, bands like Lightning Bolt and a lot of noise musicians were on the floor, and I felt like I had one foot in that world and one foot in the club world. So it made sense to play on the floor so people wouldn't be compelled to watch me. And I don't know. And the first time it came about, it was because the power went out. and I needed to stall and save time. So I just started rambling about making a circle, a clearing in the center of the room, and having a dance contest. And I really liked how it shifted the focus and created this new focal point in the room where people weren't looking forward anymore. They were all looking towards the center. And then after that, they were all looking in different directions because they were, at that point, dancing with each other and maybe subconsciously embracing the idea that the show wasn't about the musician, but about them, the audience. And so I always try to play with that idea because people, again, like most of my shows take place in like live music venues, which are based upon theater venues where there's a stage and people go and they stand and they look in the same direction and they watch the performer. And like rock music definitely has that like pageantry of theater, like we're looking at us on stage, we're rocking out for you, and like there's nothing wrong with that, but unfortunately clubs have started to embrace that as well, and people watch the DJ and DJs perform. There's nothing wrong with DJs performing, but I miss people not looking at something. I miss people, like the whole point, the reason why I love music so much is that it's such a social art, that it's both something you can engage with, but it's also furniture in the background and something to texture the air while you're socializing or hanging out or meeting new people or seeing old friends. So I want to make sure that it maintains that social aspect and doesn't become just a room full of people standing and watching, but I'd rather the show be about people engaging with each other and being the show themselves.
You did a What's in My Bag video for Amoeba Records a few years back, and you commented on the state of electronic music, that it's interesting how people still label electronic music as being called electronic music. In the video, you said, "I wonder how long it will take for electronic music to stop being called that. It wasn't like rock and roll was like, are you going to see those guitar bands? Those guitar bands are wild. I love guitars." What are your thoughts on the development of electronic music, quote-unquote electronic music today?
I still think it's pretty similar. I was actually thinking about this recently with quantum computing seemingly so close. I wonder what quantum sound will be, if there will be that to go from analog sound to digital, to if there's a equivalent for quantum, and what that will mean for how music is both, how sound is heard and created. So maybe that will change it. But I don't know. It's also hard because there's so many splintering subgenres, but then everything has to be homogenized into categories. And I feel like Spotify and sites like that are slowly starting to embrace smaller genres because they have such crazy data on what we actually listen to, and they can tell you like, oh, we can tell you really like squish ska is your number one jam. But I don't know, I think another cool thing about electronic music is that people who are 18 years old now were born in 1999. They probably grew up with music making software on every home computer they've ever had. And thinking about someone who's born today, when they're 17, it's going to be 2034, and I have no idea what music's going to be like then, or what it will have any. Will electronic music even be interesting or new sounding? And in many ways, I hope not. I hope there are vast shifts in what people are focusing in, and I'm very excited about seeing across the country like new music ensembles popping up and skilled acoustic instrument performers banding together and starting ensembles to play both music of the 20th century and in contemporary works. And I don't know, though. I have no idea. And luckily that's not for me to decide. That's for, someone who's 10 now and 27 when they're 20. It'll be interesting to see what they embrace and what trends emerge and what electronic music is. But as for now, I feel like it still sits in a similar pocket as it did a few years ago. But I mean, how could it change? It's such a massive industry. Like, you look at some of the top grossing musicians, and they're all these like mainstream club DJs. But at the same time, you also see an emerging group of more challenging musicians like Caitlin Rillius Smith and Holly Herndon, Tim Hecker, and music that's texture based, but still also has elements of songwriting and melodic content, where it's not like just heady. You can also listen to it in a very casual and pop setting. And I really love that direction of music. So I think it's always musical predictions. It's like predicting the weather. You can guess that it's going to be cold in February, but if you were to ask what the temperatures will be, I would have no idea.
What can we expect from you moving forward after these few tour dates coming up?
Well, the goal of this tour in November is to try out material live outside of Baltimore, see how the songs sound on different systems and how different audiences react to them. So it'll largely be new material, and then hopefully I'll record it and not throw it away and start over. So we shall see. But the goal is to get the record, try to finish writing by the end of the year, writing and recording, and then several other projects are in the calendar, so I need to stay on top of those. Some more film scores and production work and stuff like that.
Well, as I mentioned, Dan is going to be headlining Hasselfest on November 10th at Once Ballroom in Somerville. Dan, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today, and we'll see you on November 10th.
Thank you so much for having me.